We'll have a beautiful day today, and thank you for sharing some of this very precious and sacred day with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Patti. Thank you, Stephan, for joining. Tonight you will be performing right across the street at Amada, Correspondences, following your work, inspired by the poets that I already briefly introduced. But first, I would love to learn from you how your correspondence started. Where did you meet?
You can start.
I can start. Well, we met in the air.
We met in the air.
We were both of us flying in the same plane, and we happened to be sitting next to each other. We were both in transit too. Patti was coming back from Tangier, and I was coming back from Macedonia. We were both in a different mission. And we had a transit in Paris going to New York. And this is how it all happened.
Yes, I like to read very much, and he was sitting next to me, and he was reading a book of poems by an old friend of mine, Nico. I never saw these poems, and so I asked him about it, and he told me that he was going to do a homage to her through her poems, and it would begin recordings with the sound of crickets, because when she died, she was surrounded by crickets. And I said, who will read the poems? And he said, I don't know, we'll find somebody. And I said, I will do it. And so we landed. The next day I went to his studio, and we made the recording, and when we were done, I said, what's next? So we kept going, and we've done many, many projects together. It's a lifelong friendship that began in the sky.
Wow! And I think you also so you discovered that you share a love for poetry and also for the poets, Rimbaud and Artaud and Dalmal. And I was wondering, maybe Patti, how your relationship with some of these poets developed over time. Because when I was reading about Rimbaud, I was reading that he had a lot of correspondences also with his sister Isabella. That then. I mean, it's Easter, so on your album Easter you already were writing to Rimbaud. But again, on this album, so how has your relationship to these poets evolved?
We're really just friends. My relationship with Rimbaud's work started when I was 16. Truthfully, when I was 16, I didn't understand all of his poetry, but the beauty of his language beguiled me. And so I've read him my whole life, and as I evolved, so did my understanding of his work. And but Stephan and I not only share a love of poetry, but a concern about our world, about our environment, about our species, the many species of animals that we're losing, the war and the plight of children. So our work together reflects many, many things, truly in a poetic manner or a sonic manner, but there's a wide scope of things that we're interested in.
Yes. And it also feels that you're really working with all these events and with the work, and it's very much alive. And at Rewire Festival, all the conversations that we're having, we're really interested in in this theme of interrelations, like asking how artists establish connections between different times and territories. And in a way, you're also continuing the travel of the poets and the filmmakers that you address in your work. And I think, I mean, Stephan, you've been traveling a lot as well. You make these field recordings in Mexico, Ethiopia, India, and also a lot of spiritual places. I mean, we're in a church right now, but you've traveled to a lot of sacred spaces. And I was wondering, in your recordings, what is it that you can or maybe cannot record?
Well, you know, often we start with a conversation with Patti. We have a long conversation over dinner or walking in the streets, you know. And then when I go and start to record, I usually don't really have a really clear idea of what I'm looking for yet. I often prefer to go in a place and just let the sound dictate my time and space. Oftenly, I go with an open ear and an active presence, because I think to record you have to be present, and to hear what the track will become oftenly is dictated by the sound, especially when you go from field recording. I'm not a musician coming from field recording, and so allow the sound to dictate oftenly the future development of the tracks. Oftenly, you go for one sound, but then the sound happen, and then it overlaps, and suddenly you said, oh no, but then no, actually the overlapping of different sound creates a musicality or potential, a direction where when I will come back from those recordings and bring it to Patti, I said, hey, that happened, and this suddenly, develop a conversation, a correspondence between the sound and the conversation and the text and the poetry that Patti will write for those tracks. So this is how correspondence really started.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to say that there's almost nowhere that he won't go. He has gone up to the sacred mountains of India, in the caves of Mexico, and when we wanted to do a piece about Chernobyl, which we have, and dedicate it to all the children who, many, like a few thousand of them got pancreatic cancer from the radiation and sadly did not live long. And we wanted them to be remembered. And he went not only into the forests, we got special papers to go into, speaking for you, sorry, but just to show that he will go to find or to hear and to record the atmosphere, the sonic atmosphere of a place, into the reactor in Chernobyl, in the forest where the fruit might be beautiful and flowers are growing, but they're all radioactive. You can't eat the fruit. And the sound of the children on the outskirts. So really, the places he has gone to, all parts of Africa, to Jordan, anywhere that you can imagine he's gone, to bring me back the sound of a falling leaf, or the sound of the wind in Harar, or the sound of the wind in a cave of Mexico that's different from any other wind. And these things inspire me to improvise or write the poems or the monologues that I do.
As Patti said, it's true. Often, it could be just the sound of a leaf falling down. A winter dried leaf in Mexico, in a canyon where Arturo lived, and just it happened, just the sound of a leaf falling down, and that's only awakened a complete new possibility of where the track can go for. In Chernobyl, for example, I went there and tried to record the forest. Some of the children that are still living around the Chernobyl, because some of the family came back there to live because they don't have to pay the rent. So, a lot of abandoned villages are getting new families moving in. But suddenly also I realized by spending time there that Chernobyl back in the USSR time, it was a really rich city, Pripyat, where the reactor is just next to, and in there was the best music school, in what used to be USSR, and the best piano schools were there. So you have those hundreds of piano all over town that has been rotten, and radiation had been eating up the pianos, but they're all there. So the tracks were composed out of all those notes and leftover sound that the piano would make when we were there. And that is how all those tracks, one by one, have been developed by, encountering those different elements, and suddenly the idea of the track came with those encounters.
Yeah, but there's these beautiful layers of different times and territories, and I was also, because then you, of course, Patti, also your voice comes in as an instrument. And I was wondering how, so you're bringing the sounds into the studio, your recordings, and then how do you work together? How you're working also with the instrument of Patti, and how does that correspond in the studio work?
Well, often I see sound recording as an invisible landscape, and when you're recording it manifests itself. And I think what Patti does in our experience in the studio is that she's able to manifest those spirits that the sound holds. Like if the sound has an invisible landscape in the sense that it holds a memory of a poet or a memory of children. It holds memories, and this is where I think Patti comes with her poetry and her words, and she's manifesting them. She's giving life, basically.
He really presents me with there's sonic landscapes where it might be the sound of ocean or rain or penetrating drums or strange birds and of course the laughter of children or radio frequencies. It all sounds abstract and perhaps not even that interesting, but when I'm hearing it and it's in it from a certain area of the world or in the or a place that is meaningful to us, it creates an atmosphere and almost earth that I can walk around. In my mind, I can walk to these places or feel the spirits of these places. Because at this point in my life, I can't make difficult journeys. I can't make long, difficult journeys because of physical things. And I'm not really, you know, he's climbing mountains, he's going up to treacherous, dangerous places. And, you know, I like to be by the ocean or daydream, you know, at my desk. But he is the physical traveler, and I become the mental traveler. Because through the things that he gives me so generously, whether it's, you know, sacred rocks hit against each other or church bells chiming, you know, it could be for a piece on Andrei Rublev, he went all through Russia to get the right sound of bells, and when I hear these bells, they're like no other bells. And they take me, you know, to the time of Andrei Rublev, and you know, it's a beautiful thing because I get to journey everywhere, don't have to buy a ticket, don't have to go to the airport. I just listen and let myself be carried away.
Yeah, I'm thinking, you mentioned the mountain, and you've been traveling to mountains as well, and I think René Damal also writes about the mountain in Mountain Ellerlock, how a mountain is also between the earth and the sky, and perhaps between us as mortals on earth and the divine. And that may also, when you think of poetry and music, sort of mediating this, but also religion, of course. Yeah, is it worth climbing mountains, you think?
I don't climb them, so you'll have to ask the mountain climber.
But also maybe like mental, right? Yeah.
Well, you know, it's mountain is like the sea. It's very intoxicating, and sonically it's also very interesting because it's a sound that progressively higher you get, less sound you get, and progressively the sound of humanity, our sound basically, because we're producing sound everywhere. The sound pollution is infinite. In a mountain, progressively, everything gets erased, and what we call silence really started. And then you have the presence of the wind, which is the god of all sound up there.
Yeah.
The wind, you know, it's a rule all. And so for the piece we done on Domal and on the mountain Ellerlock, Perrette and we had done it together. A lot of sound of wind was really the starting point, the bed. And then we'll be recording in different Tibetan and plateau and other places, and that we play because all the sound of cracking doors and temples that were playing against with the sound of the wind. So the wind, in a sense, is the shared orchestra in a mountain. And whenever the wind go against the stones or the temples or others, it will create its own musicality. And this is really what we started with.
I think what is so beautiful, Patti, about the lyrics, I mean, many are poems of the poets, but you also wrote the lyrics yourself, of course, and how when we listen to the music and the sounds and your voice, and how the music that we listen to also always resonates with the time that we find ourselves in. For instance, I was really captivated by the new revelations of being They said you have no stability, and a mortal folly comes over the world. I mean, that really resonates also with the time that we find ourselves in now. How do these lyrics maybe make us time travel or resonate in the present moment? Sorry, that's a lot.
Yeah, your questions are longer than the answers, really. I mean, I've sort of, you lost me, but I think you're mentioning a piece by Artaud that ends, it's like, fire on the mountain, fire on the mountain, can't remember. But when I was reading, can you remember?
No stability.
Yes.
Yes.
I was just reading this poem, which is a very short, visceral poem by Artaud, and that he wrote in the late 30s or 40s, early 40s. But just a line from a poet that says, no stability.
Yeah.
But he wrote it, and we are now in our present, where can we find stability? So when I was reading it, it was started, no stability, because I was sort of sing-songing the poem, no stability, no stability, then no stability, no stability, no stability, because that, it was like he awakened me. Yes, he felt no stability in his time, and look at the times we're in. He was writing this maybe after World War II, and at the end of a very unstable time, but still sensing the lack of stability, and now we are living in the center of it. And so, these words will draw, people write things all through history. We just repeat history over and over, and repeat our mistakes over and over, and repeat the beauty over and over. And, that's, so it's not surprising that poems that he wrote in the 40s would resonate now. But this is all through history. But I hope that answers the question that I don't know what the question was.
Even better. So we're in this church, the Nieuwe Church, and actually in the garden here is the grave monument by Baruch Spinoza. And he said that there is no hope unmingled with fear, but also no fear unmingled with hope. But also that if we want the present to be different from the past, we should also study the past. And so how do we learn from our ancestors? Or how do we take responsibility for future generations?
Well, there's a real simple way to know how to learn from your ancestors. The good things. I mean, listen to your mother. Because I learned, if I would have listened to my mother in 80% of the things that she told me, I would have had much less trouble in my life. And so our ancestors and our elders, even as we are evolving and evolving past them perhaps, they have knowledge. There is knowledge in our scriptures, there is knowledge in our holy books, there is knowledge in from our teachers, from our children. I know that my children are smarter than me, even though I don't tell them that. But listening to one another, listening and trying to solve any problem we have by talking with, not just talking, listening. Listening is the great key. This is where Stephan excels between us. I'm not the best listener. He's a beautiful listener because he will hear the simple, oh, those pebbles hitting together. That is a different sound that I've ever heard, even though I've been all over the world walking on different pebbles. The sound of Jean-Luc Godard's footsteps in the snow, which he has recordings of. All of these things are precious. So, listening is a very important way to, listening to our inner self, listening to our blood, because everything our ancestors know is in our blood. We just have to listen.
Yeah, listening. No, but, I mean, as I said before, in listening, there's an act of presence. And what I notice the most often when I'm recording is that it requires me to be present. And when we are in a present time, then everything happens. Then synchronicity happens. Then you see the world. You know. Most of the time we hijack by our mind or our talks, or talks of others. So the field recording mode is also, I see it as a special practice in a sense, you know, a practice of presence.
Do you think about the children of our children who will find your recordings and perhaps also continue the journey that you started?
Truthfully, I like to think of future children making their own recordings.
Yeah.
Or making their own. I always, you know, if somebody says they like the work that I do or something, I'm always encouraging them to thank you very much, but time for you to focus on your ideas. You know, maybe just because they are the future. They are the future. The work that we do hopefully will be inspiring to the present and inspiring the future, but each generation, you know, makes new strides toward, you know, greater knowledge. And yeah. I guess that's all. Sorry, I hit a wall there.
Do you, Stephan, maybe want to say something about how you translated the work to the stage tonight, involving all these different media?
Well, you know, it's a combination of having great artists that you mentioned earlier, thank you. All together we have the chance to revisit some of the compositions, some of the field recording, from there expanding it, trying to, with Patti, to bring back the experience of the studio, the experience of, you know, of searching for some truths or some kind of places. This is the first time we're playing this correspondence. It's the premiere. It's all Patti writing and poetry. So before we've been revisiting some of the other poets you were just mentioning, but this is all original work from Patti. So it's quite special, I think. We're looking forward.
It's always, you know, exciting to do something for the first time. And this tonight, as Stephan said, we are doing 6 pieces that we've done together that we've never done in front of anyone. So, you know, it's exciting and a little scary, but in a good way. It's a good way because also the way we work, you really can't make a mistake. If you make a mistake, then you find some new place to go. So I'm just interested to see where we go together and with our fellow workers and with the people, because we all create together. Even right now, we're into this short little conversation. We're all creating this together, and I'm sorry for myself seeing everyone here. That, you know, we have more work to do at sound check and a performance, so this is short. But it's, you know, I could sit here for hours and just talk. But I'm very aware that today and this week, you know, even though I don't have a religion myself, I study all religions, and I study these days very carefully and find these days of contemplation. You have between Good Friday and tomorrow, there are many, many aspects of, you know, the human character, of how we can conduct ourselves in the future, of hope, of despair, of agony and beauty, all in these precious few days. And so very happy to spend even a few minutes with all of you.
Do you have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience? Yeah. You can speak up and then I'll
I was wondering if you could both talk a little bit more about the relationship between the field recordings and the poetry, because I'm wondering if they influence each other, or do you view them as equals, if one maybe leads the other when you're composing something.
So the question is, how do the field recordings and your poetry work together or influence each other?
For example, what we're going to present tonight, I would think it's like somewhere around 5 to 6 years in the making. It's a very slow process, layers and layers of conversation, of me going and recording places, and sometimes we think there's something and then no, then we go somewhere else, and then and so progressively, layers by layers, it gets solidified and something crystallized in a sense, and then, as I was saying before, we don't know where we're going, but there's these little stones or truths or little clarity or little peradam, little crystal that come on the way, and then eventually the piece is created, slowly by having back and forth conversation, but also different studio where we go in London or in Berlin or in New York, in Paris, and we will meet and we go back, and sometimes we do, sometimes we do from scratch. In the Andrei Rublev that Patti mentioned, we redone this, I don't know how many times over how many years. And suddenly something happened, and then that's it. We know this is working, it's there. So I don't think there's really, it's a conversation really. And the conversation has really no clarity in the sense of, we don't have a goal. It's just in the process that it comes clear.
It's also a process of discovery through improvisation and channeling. I like very much the story of Medea. The two of us, he told me things I didn't know, and I studied and read books and plays and contemplated her. And he went to the area of her world and her life. And when I listened to his, I had no text. I just went in the studio, in front of the microphone, and listened to all the sounds that he brought me back from her world, from the mountains or the sea or anywhere that resonated Medea and her story. And it just drew out of me one long monologue of her telling her whole life. I don't think I would have ever written that, and yet I'm so proud. It's one of the things I'm proud of, is this piece, because these field recordings brought back to me, drew me into her physical world. And so we can merge the physical world with the spiritual and the natural world. And so I would say these, for me, these field recordings have really changed my life. They've given me, I've improvised to rock and roll songs, or, 3 chords to heavy metal sounds, or feedback guitar. But the impressions, sonic impressions of sacred places have drawn out whole new things for me. So I'm quite grateful.
Thank you to you. No, actually, Medea is a good, interesting cases, because for each piece there's a lot of thinking of what kind of field recording, what kind of approach, what kind of method of recording I'm going to use, because I'm changing every time for each track a different approach. For Medea, there was a dimension of Argonaut and the way how Jason convinced Medea, and how Medea left with Jason back from the Black Sea, from Patti on the coast of Georgia, crossing the entire Black Sea back to Greece. I went on a boat then and used a bunch of scanners who record all the sound frequencies of communication at sea of the boat of today, from military to trafficant to cargoes to any type of communication that uses short or long wave at sea. And that, by having 7 scanners that I record all the sound overlying the 7 scanners one by one all together, and we create this accident, this overlay or sound, this thick oceans of sound in a sense, you know, and with all those fragments of conversation, and that became for Patti places where she really had, I would say, you know, for Patti really a vision, and the way you deliver it was